Good morning, Gentle Parents Unite. It's great to be here with you this morning. I'm here talking to Courtney Druhart. We're going to be talking about autism. We're going to talk about some of the misconceptions, learning how to maybe spot some of the signs in your children. We're going to talk about the benefits of and the pros and cons of getting a diagnosis, and a little bit on how to hold space for your child and help them through what it is that they're experiencing in life. So I'm really excited to be here with you this morning. Courtney, how are you doing today?
I'm so excited as well. Really nervous, really cold, but excited.
So, you yourself are not neurotypical. You have an autism diagnosis as well as some other health struggles.
Correct. I am autistic as well as having ADHD combined type and a scattering of mental illnesses rather, as well as some health challenges, as well as physical health problems, and I consider myself multiply disabled, including my autism. I do consider autism a disability. I'm so sorry. I just keep starting into things and not where I'm going.
Interesting learning about sensitivity and my own ableism, and I'm going to defer to you a lot on all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. I know that there's a lot of misconceptions and hurtful ideas around autism, and
yes.
To hear you say that you consider it a disability, I would really love to explore that a little bit and hear where you're coming from on that, so that
yes.
I'm able to understand better and speak properly and not contribute to any harmful thought patterns myself.
Absolutely. It's a really important conversation and something that a lot of people have very different ideas on. But I myself go by the social model of disability, which pretty much means that we are disabled not by our bodies or minds or abilities or support needs, but rather the environment that isn't prepared for those, or prepared for your needs or your neurotype or your body or the way that you experience life. It's really down to a lack of accommodations and a world not built for us.
Wow, yes, that makes so much sense. I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate you clarifying that for me. If I misstep along the way and say something that comes from my place of lack of understanding, please speak up and correct me and help me to grow my knowledge on this. I do want to say to the GPU family here that I know we've all followed my story for all of these years, and I've talked about my son Caleb, who's now 13. He'll be 14 in just about a month here. And creating kind of a buffer around him for the big meltdowns. I always referred to him as spirited, and it's been known that there was a little bit more difficulty around raising him. Mm-hmm. We did recently, 2 weeks ago, get an autism diagnosis for him, which came, it took me a couple days, to be really honest, to kind of process my own thoughts and feelings around this diagnosis. And what came at the end for myself and for Caleb was a lot of new acceptance and understanding. I think this is where we can really go into the pros and cons of getting a diagnosis.
Yes.
For my family, what that has meant is a new level of understanding and acceptance, and it's removed a lot of exterior judgment from Caleb, who is not neurotypical, and he doesn't experience the world the way that neurotypical folks do. And I feel like for my family coming to this, it's been a major pro. It really gave us, what it did was it opened a whole new set of tools and a whole new doorway for us to come to a deeper level of understanding and connection For you, Courtney, were there some pros around getting your diagnosis?
Absolutely. It was a world opener. I mean, truly, it allowed myself and my family to really make sense of the way I experience everything and sort of connect with a community of people who experience similar things and challenges and really develop a deeper understanding of who I am and where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. Were there also some maybe cons or negative feelings or?
Yes, autism is a disability, whether you consider it one, whether you identify as disabled or not, and disabled people are a very marginalized group. So a diagnosis does stigma and drawbacks, and there are a lot of scary things that can happen to people who have these diagnoses because your competence can be questioned and because they can be used against you. And with all of the misperceptions surrounding autism, that's even more so because autism is viewed as like making someone incapable or incompetent or not having anything to say or not understanding what's happening.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think that's a really big thing, a good thing to point out. I feel that for my family, I feel that not knowing all this time, because I was able to hold space for Caleb's feelings in a way, has been helpful and kind of removed that stigma, because Caleb is still Caleb and nobody sees him any differently except for an understanding of why he can struggle in some areas so intensely.
Definitely.
So far, instead of feeling any of that negativity of those concepts, for my family, it really opened them wanting to understand better exactly what autism is and what that means, because they didn't
identifying your child as autistic is one of the most important things you can really do, whether or not you pursue a diagnosis, because it really is so much more than a diagnosis. I mean, diagnoses focus on the negative aspects and how they impact daily functioning, but not necessarily all of the characteristics, not even close.
Right.
And giving your child that sense of identity and that explanation and community really will do wonders for them.
Absolutely, I agree. And it opens up new therapies. And
yes,
it opens
the diagnosis at least. If you think that there's any possibility that your child will need official supports now or in the future, definitely pursue a diagnosis as quickly as you can, because the longer you go without, the fewer records you have, and the more people and the government and resources will take that to mean that, you know, all of this time you were living without these supports, so you must not need them.
Right. And that is very important, because those different supports are going to offer your children new tools and new supports, new mentors, and people that can really help guide them in life and help them learn about themselves.
Absolutely.
Now, this is something that I also wanted to speak with you about, is when we're talking about all these new supports and new therapies and things that open, some of these therapies are not suggested within the autism community. Some of them are less than desirable. Some of them are behavioral modification, and some of them beyond that are considered to be straight up abusive. Can you identify for us some of the ones that you would recommend, some of the ones you would recommend with caution, and some that you would say that would be best to stay away from completely?
Yes, of course. With therapies, the most important thing to look for is that they are seeing your child as an autistic child who experiences the world the way that they do and reacts the way that they do, and then takes all of that information and really builds a plan around supporting them and finding what they want for their own life and what skills they need to get there and what other ways to do those things that exist, rather than sort of treating autism as an illness to be recovered from, or treating, because then you're really viewing all of the traits that make your child who they are as symptoms rather than communication.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I find occupational therapy to be very beneficial, and the field is very progressive in terms of being life participation focused, which really just means that the focus is on the client themselves and what they want to do with their life and what they're frustrated by not being able to do, and really work with them rather than against them.
Oh, yes. That sounds wonderful.
Of course, other therapies that can be helpful to autistic people include like cognitive behavioral therapy, art therapy, music therapy, all sorts of things that really anyone can do. Just stepping back from the idea that you're getting a therapy to treat autism and really finding the therapies that your autistic child needs, looking at the individual problems for what they are rather than just seeing it all as autism.
Right. Giving them a place where they can shine as themselves.
Yes.
As opposed to trying to change their world or their perceptions.
Yes, I do very much endorse occupational therapy. And of course, it's always going to be a matter of, how good the therapist is and what their model is and how they approach it. But generally, supports for sensory processing and just that sort of energy and the physical challenges, having supports in place and learning coping mechanisms and things that you can do to support your body really helps you be more calm and organized and everything else.
Awesome. That is so helpful. I really appreciate that. And again, from the place of somebody who is just beginning my journey to truly understanding, and my journey with my own family, and defining what it means for me, then it is really helpful, because I am looking at going into these therapies and wanting to be cautious and make sure that whatever we do is something that aligns with not only gentle parenting, but being respectful of the human that my child is. And
yes, thank you so much for saying that.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Courtney. It's so far just absolutely amazing and beautiful. And I know that so many people are going to benefit from hearing you speak, truly.
Thank you. I get worried about this a lot of times because I say these things so often, and they've become such an innate part of my dialogue that they feel almost like common sense to me. But I know so many people need to hear these things, and they just need someone to say that it's okay to look outside of these sort of traditional expectations, and that this isn't the only way.
Absolutely. And I am really grateful to you. Definitely want to just reiterate, I know I've told you before in our chats and conversations that we've had, that I'm just so grateful to you for the education you have provided me over the last 1.5 2 years. I'm not sure, it's been a while, but
Yeah.
I have learned so much from you, and
I from you.
Really being here with you it's really such an honor. And the help that you've provided me, I really hope that those listening really hear you and see you for the value of the things you're sharing with us from a firsthand perspective. Because I don't know how we would have processed what we've been processing in the last couple of weeks without the supports and understanding and education that you've provided me. And I am really grateful for that.
Absolutely. Could we talk a little bit about that? Just parents receiving that diagnosis with no other information?
Absolutely.
Because that really is, so many of even the parents listening to this, they've probably experienced the fear-mongering and all of the doctors listing all of the things that their children won't ever be able to do, and the low expectations. And it's almost like autism is handed out as a death sentence. And then not even 5 minutes after you receive a diagnosis, you're told, you know, you need at least 40 hours a week of intensive behavioral therapy, or your child has no hope of ever developing beyond this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it really just sends the message that autistic people aren't human beings who continue to develop and who behave in ways for reasons, you know, and really the basis of these behavioral therapies aimed towards autism have really harmed the perception of autistic people, because it is so focused only on behavioral learning and only antecedents, and just seeing behavior as this sort of external repetition rather than communication and an external source of insight to what's going on inside.
Well, thank you so much for that. That is really, really big. You know, I think that a lot of parents do stumble up in that, and they get this diagnosis, and suddenly it's just like put out there, and there's a sense of pain, a sense of loss, a sense of feeling that your child may never function in society. They may never fall in love. They may never have these things. And suddenly you're actually viewing your child as a different person. And
right. There's a lot of, I see so often from the parent community, words like grief and mourning, and it's like their child has died, you know, when they receive this diagnosis, but it doesn't have to be this way. This child is still the same person who you've always known, and now you just have answers, you know, you have an explanation and a source of understanding. And there's this whole huge autistic community that is just amazing and talented, and there are autistic researchers and therapists and all sorts of different things really working so hard on our own time just to ensure that children don't have to grow up facing the same things that we did. The majority of my generation and the generations before mine of autistic people were so badly abused in every possible way, and I face discrimination every single day of my life because of it.
Yes. There's so much.
Sorry, that was a little heavy.
There's so much misunderstanding around it and so little awareness. And I am really grateful for my own raised awareness. And I realize that the world really has a long ways to come on understanding how we can make this world a world that is comfortable for all people, not just neurotypical people. I know there's a lot of talk about autism being on the rise. Now, knowing what I know now, I really don't feel that. What I see is a lot of people in my generation and my parents' generation
who have gone undiagnosed.
Absolutely. You know, when I look around me, I wonder and I feel what these diagnoses mean for myself and other members of my family. And I realize how so much of it is intertwined with some of the struggles that many of us have had. And I do really want to point out that autism has been around for a long time. And the criteria for what meets the diagnosis has changed a lot because the understanding around it has grown. So
yes. Definitely. And I know there are still discrepancies in girls and people of color, especially young Black girls, going undiagnosed and really much, much more aggressively stigmatized and put in danger, even with a diagnosis. So we really do have a long way to go, but we've come really far as well.